What if I told you that right now an invisible army is rising and soon no city will be safe? From rats that brought the Black Death to ants invading entire countries, to deadly jellyfish closing beaches and mosquitoes preparing the next epidemic, the real question is, are we ready for nature's next attack? Stay with me, because what you're about to discover will change the way you see the world forever. Imagine for a moment an isolated city hidden among mountains with winding cobblestone streets and old wooden houses where the smell of burning wood mixes with the cold air of the Middle Ages. Now picture this picturesque scene turning into a real nightmare. Because that's exactly what happened in Hamelin, Germany in 1284. A massive invasion of rats, millions of them, took over the city in a way no one had ever seen before. They came from every corner, crawling out of the sewers, slipping through cracks in the houses, even running over the rooftops as if they had emerged straight from the depths of the earth. Terrified, people watched helplessly as the rodents devoured the crops, destroyed entire food supplies, bit children in their cribs, and spread deadly diseases that silently claimed lives during the night. A city once full of life became a prisoner to an army of sharp teeth and glowing red eyes in the darkness. And it was at the height of this despair that the most mysterious character of this story appeared, the Pied Piper of Hamelin. Dressed in colourful clothes and wearing an enigmatic expression, he calmly walked through the infested streets, while all eyes, filled with fear and hope, turned toward him. Without saying a word, the man raised his silver flute and began to play a hypnotic melody, as if the music had the power to control the impossible. And that's exactly what happened. Thousands of rats, as if under a spell, began to follow him in a sinister procession. The entire city watched in stunned silence as the piper led the plague to the nearest river. And there, one by one, the rats plunged into the water and disappeared. The townspeople, finally free from that torment, could breathe in relief. But that relief soon turned into tragedy. When the piper returned to collect the reward he had been promised, the city leaders refused to pay. And that was the moment the story took a dark turn that would never be forgotten. In one final act of revenge, the piper played his flute again. But this time, the dark melody didn't call the rats. It called the children. Boys and girls left their homes as if sleepwalking and silently followed the piper, disappearing into the hills without a trace. The desperate cries of the parents echoed through the now empty streets, but it was too late. A city once devastated by rats was now empty, consumed by grief and sorrow. And the most chilling part? There are official ancient records in Hamelin that do mention the mysterious disappearance of dozens, maybe even hundreds, of children that year. To this day, no one knows for sure what really happened. Was it just a legend or a dark event erased from history? And that was just the first story of today. Because if you think a city overrun by rats is terrifying, wait until you hear about the next case, when the sky was completely covered by millions of insects, turning day into a night of pure horror. So make sure you subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell, and get ready, because what comes next is even more shocking. Now, if the story of Hamelin already left you speechless, imagine what happened in 1875, right in the heart of the United States, when the entire sky simply vanished, swallowed by a living storm of millions, or better yet, trillions, of ravenous creatures. Yes, we're talking about the largest locust plague ever recorded in human history, the Rocky Mountain locust swarm, which covered the skies of entire states like Nebraska, Kansas, and Minnesota in a scene that looks like it came straight out of an apocalyptic horror movie. To give you an idea, reports from that time describe the sky going dark in broad daylight, as if night had suddenly fallen. But it wasn't the moon covering the sun. It was billions of locusts flying together in a cloud so dense that day turned to night within minutes. And the worst part? This living cloud didn't just pass over the cities, it landed with force, devouring everything in sight with its sharp jaws. People back then watched in terror as their fields, entire crops of corn and wheat, simply vanished before their eyes, as if they had never existed. And it wasn't just crops they ate, no. The locusts would go after clothes hanging on the line, curtains in the windows, wooden furniture, and the most terrifying part, they attacked people themselves, gnawing on their clothes, forcing men, women, and children to lock themselves inside their homes, bolting doors and windows, and praying for it to end. Can you imagine sitting in your house, listening to the deafening sound of millions of wings beating all at once, while the sun disappears and everything around you turns into an end-of-the-world scene? And here's the most shocking part. According to experts, the number of locusts in that swarm may have exceeded 12 trillion individuals. Yes, you heard that right, 12 trillion. Just to give you an idea of what that means, if each of those locusts were placed side by side, they could cover half of the United States in a living, crawling carpet. The consequences were devastating. Thousands of families lost everything they had, faced starvation, and endured misery like never before. And as if that weren't enough, this disaster left such deep scars in the collective memory that even today it is remembered as one of the worst natural catastrophes in American history. And here's the most mysterious part. Just a few decades later, that very species of locust simply vanished from the face of the Earth with no definitive scientific explanation. But climate experts warn, with global warming and extreme environmental changes, a plague like this could return at any moment, and even stronger than before. Now, if everything you've heard so far already sounds terrifying, get ready, because in the next story, it's not rats or locusts, it's an army of killer ants that attack in swarms and have already left entire villages in panic. So stay with us, hit that like button, and comment below. What would you do if you saw the entire sky suddenly disappear? After a sky taken over by locusts, now imagine the entire ground covered by millions of venomous ants. Ants that don't just bite, but inject a poison so powerful it can cause severe skin burns, unbearable pain, and even kill small animals within minutes. Sounds like something straight out of a horror movie, right? But this is the terrifying reality happening right now in Australia. A country facing a true war against fire ants, an invasive and highly aggressive species that has been spreading like an unstoppable plague. Originally from South America, these ants arrived hidden in cargo ships, probably mixed in with goods or containers, and since then they've been conquering Australian territory so fast that authorities already admit it might be impossible to wipe them out completely. The scene is pure panic. These ants won't stop multiplying and form gigantic colonies, with millions of individuals ready to attack anything that moves. Victims describe the bites as if they were being stabbed by burning needles, with pain that lasts for hours and causes pus-filled blisters and intense inflammation. And the most dangerous part, for some people, the allergic reaction is so severe it can trigger anaphylactic shock and lead to death within minutes if immediate medical help isn't available. And the problem isn't confined to farms or remote areas. These ants are invading homes, backyards, parks, schools, hospitals, and even large urban centers, putting the lives of children, the elderly, pets, and entire communities at risk. And it doesn't stop there. The environmental impact of these ants is devastating. They attack and kill native Australian wildlife, small birds, lizards, frogs, and even medium-sized mammals. The result? Entire species are now at risk of extinction because they can't defend themselves against these coordinated and brutal insect attacks. The damage to nature is enormous, but the financial losses are also staggering. It's estimated that fire ants have already caused billions of dollars in damages, destroying crops, killing livestock, and forcing entire cities to spend fortunes on infrastructure adaptations to try to contain the infestation. Just imagine the chaos: schools being forced to suspend classes, hospitals spending massive amounts on antbite treatments, parks and public areas closed indefinitely. And here's the darkest warning: with climate change accelerating, the perfect habitat for these ants is expanding, and scientists fear they might soon reach other continents, including right here in Brazil. Now, if just thinking about accidentally stepping on a killer ant nest already sends shivers down your spine, brace yourself, because the next case will leave you speechless. There is a place in Brazil where venomous snakes rule everything, and walking there means risking your life with every step. So make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and comment below. What would you do if you saw your city's streets covered by millions of poisonous ants? Because what's coming next will blow your mind. And if until now we've talked about rats, locusts, and ants, get ready, because what's coming next is even more terrifying. A place completely overrun by venomous snakes, where it's simply not safe to take a single step off the path without risking your life. We're talking about Ilha da Queimada Grande, located off the coast of São Paulo, Brazil, considered one of the most dangerous and deadly places in the entire world. But unlike what many people imagine, this island, which from afar looks like a tropical paradise with its lush green trees and towering cliffs, hides a secret that would make anyone shudder in fear. It is home to an estimated population of over 5,000 venomous snakes, all belonging to a rare and extremely deadly species known as the golden lancehead viper, a serpent whose venom is powerful enough to melt the flesh of its prey within just a few hours. And here's the scariest part: these snakes don't exist anywhere else on Earth. They have been trapped on that island for thousands of years, and with no natural predators to control them, they multiplied uncontrollably, turning Queimada Grande into a true serpent kingdom. That's why the island has been completely closed to the public, and today only biologists, scientists, and authorized researchers are allowed to set foot there. And even they must wear special suits, reinforced boots, and use state-of-the-art safety equipment. One wrong step could easily be the last. But what makes this story even darker are the urban legends surrounding Snake Island. Rumors say that in the past, people actually tried to live there, including lighthouse keepers tasked with maintaining the island's old lighthouse. And according to some reports, those people mysteriously disappeared, supposedly attacked by swarms of snakes that invaded their wooden houses. The most famous story tells of a lighthouse keeper and his family who were found dead, surrounded by dozens of serpents, in a scene so disturbing that shortly after, the government decided to deactivate the lighthouse and permanently seal off the island. Truth or legend, no one dares to find out. The venom of the golden lancehead is so potent that it can kill a full-grown adult human in just minutes. And the most shocking part, there is no specific antivenom for this species, meaning that if someone gets bitten, the chances of survival are almost zero. And while Ilha da Queimada Grande remains a chilling reminder that nature will always have the upper hand over humanity, the next chapter will shock you even more, because now we're traveling back in time to the moment when not just a city, but all of Europe was consumed by creatures that spread death and terror. The rats of the Black Death, the deadliest pandemic in human history. So, make sure to subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell, and comment below. Would you dare to spend a single day on Snake Island? Because what's coming next will make you see rats in a whole new way. After exploring an island ruled by venomous snakes, now let's travel back in time to one of the darkest and most terrifying chapters in human history. When millions of rats took over the streets, houses, markets, and even the luxurious palaces of one of Europe's greatest cities, Paris. We're talking about the 14th century, during the peak of the dreaded Black Death, the deadliest pandemic ever recorded, which wiped out nearly 1/3 of Europe's population in less than 5 years. And what few people know is that the true cause of this devastation wasn't just the virus or bacteria itself, but the rats, or to be even more precise, the fleas living on their bodies, carrying the deadly microorganism, the infamous Yersinia pestis bacterium. The streets of Paris at that time were the perfect breeding ground for this disaster, filled with garbage, open sewers running along the roads, rotting food tossed everywhere, and absolutely no sanitation control. Imagine walking through narrow, dark streets crawling with rats in every direction, jumping out of garbage piles, sneaking into homes, running right across people's feet. And it didn't matter if you were a noble, a peasant, or a king. Everyone was equally exposed to this living nightmare. And the most terrifying part? With every bite from those infected fleas, a new victim would begin to show some of the most horrifying symptoms imaginable: raging fevers, violent vomiting, hallucinations, and the most infamous sign of all, enormous, black, painful boils growing all over the body until death came, slowly and agonizingly. And the scene only got worse. The corpses piled up in the streets like trash, left to rot because there was no one left to bury them. And the rats? They would gnaw on the decomposing bodies, spreading more contaminated fleas, fueling a never-ending cycle of death. The eyewitness accounts from that time are chilling. Entire families vanished in a matter of days, neighbors disappeared overnight, and fear was so overwhelming that people stopped burying their own relatives out of terror of catching the plague themselves. And to make it all even more hopeless, there was no cure, no treatment, no escape. The Black Death obliterated entire populations, turning once vibrant cities into ghost towns of total abandonment and despair. The scariest part? The world was never the same after this event, and rats were forever marked in history as messengers of death, creatures that, unknowingly, carried a terror that changed the course of humanity. But if you think that's all in the past, brace yourself, because what comes next is even more terrifying. What if I told you that a new infestation, just as dangerous, or maybe even worse, could be happening right now, somewhere in the world, growing silently, completely unnoticed? And the worst part, no one knows the scale of the threat that might be forming as you watch this video. So before we go on, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and comment below. Do you think the world is ready to face something like this again? And stay until the end, because in the next case, we're going to uncover the hidden signs of a new plague that could explode at any moment. After hearing all these terrifying stories about rats, locusts, ants, and snakes, it's impossible not to wonder, has all of this really been left in the past? And the answer, my friend, might be far more disturbing than you think. The truth is that new infestations are happening right now, as we speak, in different parts of the world. And what experts have been warning behind the scenes is even more alarming. The worst may still be coming. With climate change, rising temperatures, and rampant deforestation, animals and insects that once lived isolated in nature are now invading cities, farmlands, and even massive urban centers, bringing chaos straight into our daily lives. A recent example that's already keeping people awake at night is the spread of so-called Argentine ant supercolonies across Europe. These ants may be tiny, but they are extremely aggressive and are now spreading through dozens of cities, attacking other insects, destroying entire crops, and worse, invading houses, apartments, and commercial buildings. Imagine opening your front door only to be faced with a wall of ants advancing like an unstoppable army. And this isn't some distant future. This is happening right now. But the problem goes way beyond ants. All around the world, scientists are closely monitoring with serious concern the uncontrolled spread of Aedes aegypti mosquitoes, carriers of deadly viruses like dengue, Zika, and chikungunya. In some cities, especially in hotter regions, the mosquito population has grown so much that experts are now warning of a real risk of urban epidemics, outbreaks that could spiral out of control and affect millions of people. But as if threats on land and in the air weren't enough, danger is also coming from the sea. In several parts of the world, gigantic swarms of venomous jellyfish have been invading popular beaches, forcing authorities to shut down entire coastal areas. And we're not talking about simple stings. The toxins from these jellyfish can cause severe wounds, life-threatening allergic reactions, and even cardiac arrest within minutes. And the scariest part? These invasions are becoming more frequent, more intense, and dangerously closer to populated areas. And behind all this chaos is human activity, the destruction of natural habitats, the disruption of ecosystems, the warming of our oceans, and total environmental collapse. We are forcing these creatures to seek new territories. And guess what territory is easiest to invade? Exactly where we live. And that leaves us with one big question. What will happen when these animals, stronger, more resistant, and increasingly adapted to human environments, decide to fully take over our cities? Are we truly prepared to face a new wave of plagues like the ones that ravaged the world in the past? Maybe the next great infestation is much closer than we think. So if you want to keep following these terrifying stories and learn what science is predicting about the future of deadly animals and unstoppable plagues, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment below. Which of these infestations shocked you the most? Let's keep uncovering nature's darkest secrets. Because believe me, the danger might be closer than you think. After all of this, you're probably wondering, are these terrifying invasion stories really a thing of the past? The answer is no. And what comes next will leave you even more shocked, because now we're going back in time, straight to one of the darkest periods in human history. When millions of rats took over the streets, homes, and even the grandest palaces of Europe, spreading a plague so devastating it changed the course of the world forever. Yes, we're talking about the infamous Black Death and the deadliest pandemic in history, which between 1347 and 1351 wiped out nearly 1/3 of Europe's population in just a few short years, leaving behind nothing but death, despair, and destruction. And who were the main culprits behind spreading this nightmare? The rats, freely roaming the filthy streets of cities like Paris, London, and Rome. Now picture this scene: dirty streets piled with garbage, rotting food everywhere, open sewage flowing through alleyways, and hundreds of rats scurrying from one side to the other, running between people's legs, climbing onto beds, invading kitchens and marketplaces. But the real danger, the fleas living on those rats. Tiny, invisible, but carrying a deadly bacterium, Yersinia pestis. All it took was a single flea bite, and within days a person would be infected, showing horrifying symptoms: burning fever, violent vomiting, and the most feared sign, huge black boils rapidly spreading across the body, followed by agonizing death. And with rats overrunning the cities, there was no escape. Not even nobles and kings were safe. The Black Death didn't choose its victims, rich or poor, children or elders. Everyone fell. And here's the most terrifying part: the bodies, by the thousands, piled up in the streets like garbage. And the rats? They would crawl among the rotting corpses, gnawing on them and spreading even more infected fleas, fueling an endless cycle of death. Eyewitnesses from that time described entire cities falling silent, with the smell of death filling the air, as entire families disappeared within days. What few people realize is that this wasn't an isolated tragedy. The Black Death ravaged not just Paris but all of Europe. And to this day, historians estimate that between 75 and 200 million people died across the continent, a number so massive it forever changed how we live, work, and relate to nature. And the scariest thought? With today's changing climate, the return of plagues like this is not out of the question. So here's the question that won't go away. Are we truly prepared to face a new plague, one as devastating or even worse than the Black Death? Because all signs point to something already brewing, and a new threat might be growing while we carry on unaware. That's why, if you want to keep following these real-life stories that sound like horror movies, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and comment below. Which of these infestations did you find the most terrifying? And don't go anywhere, because in the next videos, we're going to reveal even more shocking true cases of creatures that challenged humanity and almost brought the world to the brink of collapse. After traveling through history and learning about some of the most terrifying infestations that have devastated cities, farmlands, and even entire continents, there's one question that just won't go away. What if the next great disaster isn't buried in the past, but actually growing right now, silently, right beneath our feet, without us even realizing it? The truth, as hard as it may be to accept, is that while we remember these frightening stories, new threats are forming every single day around the world, and many experts are warning a global super infestation could happen at any moment, so devastating that it could affect millions of people and threaten the very structure of entire cities. Want an example? In Europe, the infamous Argentine ants, tiny, almost invisible, but with unbelievable destructive power, are already spreading through dozens of cities, forming what scientists call super colonies. Imagine an invisible, highly organized army capable of linking thousands of nests into a single, massive network, taking over entire neighborhoods. These ants don't just attack other insects, they invade homes, destroy electronics, harm pets, and even pose a risk to people's health with bites that can trigger severe allergic reactions. And it doesn't stop there. They are causing millions of dollars in damages to the economy, wiping out crops, weakening building foundations, and creating irreversible damage to the environment. But if you think the problem is limited to solid ground, look to the sky. Mosquitoes like the dreaded Aedes aegypti, carriers of deadly diseases like dengue, Zika, and chikungunya, are evolving and adapting to new climates. Because of global warming, they're now surviving in regions where they never would have existed before. That means cold countries, which never had to worry about epidemics like these, could soon face massive outbreaks. Just imagine it. Cities in Europe, the United States, and Japan plunged into unprecedented epidemics, with hospitals overflowing, schools shutting down, and fear gripping every street. And as if land and air threats weren't enough, the ocean is also turning against us. Massive swarms of venomous jellyfish are already invading beaches in Europe and Asia, forcing authorities to shut down entire tourist destinations and putting coastal cities on high alert. These creatures, armed with powerful toxins, can cause excruciating burns, and in some cases, death within minutes. And scientists are warning these invasions are only going to get worse as oceans heat up and natural jellyfish predators vanish. So now the big question is, are we prepared to face this new era of infestations? Or, like in Hamelin, will we have to pay a terrible price just to try to take back control? Will we wait until the problem is right at our doorstep to act? or will we ignore it until it's far too late? Comment below. Do you think we are ready for the next great attack from nature? And don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel, because in the next episodes, I am going to reveal more shocking, real, and hidden stories that most people have never heard. But that could completely change the way you see the world around you. So hit that notification bell and stay tuned, because what's coming next might be even more terrifying. After traveling through these terrifying stories of rats, locusts, ants, and snakes, now it's time to go back to the darkest chapter in human history, when not just a city, but all of Europe was overtaken by creatures that spread terror and death. Yes, we're talking about the Black Death, the pandemic that in the 14th century wiped out an estimated 75 to 200 million people in less than 5 years, devastating entire cities and leaving behind a trail of destruction the world has never forgotten. But what many people still don't know is that the main culprits behind this silent tragedy were rats. Rats that roamed freely through streets, homes, markets, and even the grand palaces of kings. And the most terrifying part, these rats were never alone. Along with them came fleas infected with the deadly Yersinia pestis bacterium, the microscopic killer responsible for spreading the disease that became known as the plague that destroyed the medieval world. Imagine the streets of Paris, London, Venice, and Rome overrun by rats. Hundreds, thousands of them racing through alleyways, crawling into beds, invading markets, and even climbing onto church altars. While people, unaware, were being bitten by fleas carrying death in their tiny bodies. And the symptoms? Absolutely horrifying. First, a raging fever, then violent vomiting, hallucinations, and within days, massive, black, rotting boils that spread across the body. A clear sign that the end was near, because once those boils appeared, few survived more than 3 days. And the worst part? There was no cure, no treatment, no hope. Families watched helplessly as loved ones fell one after another until the entire house fell silent, swallowed by death. And when you looked out onto the streets, it was a scene straight out of a horror film. Piles of corpses, entire streets reeking of death and decay, and rats scurrying across rotting bodies, spreading even more infected fleas. No one was safe. Not nobles, not kings, not priests, not peasants. The plague didn't care who you were. And the most terrifying part, people became so desperate that they started to fear one another, terrified of a cough, a sneeze, or a fever. Humanity collapsed under the weight of fear. Cities looked like war zones, empty streets, silent churches, abandoned markets, and an unbearable stench of death hanging in the air. And perhaps the most shocking part of all? It all started with rats, small creatures carrying destruction on their backs. And if you think this is just a thing of the past, think again, because infectious disease experts are warning with climate change, global warming, and the destruction of natural habitats, plagues like the Black Death can return, and maybe even stronger than before. After all, rats are still everywhere in the world's largest cities, and fleas are still out there, invisible to the eye, carrying viruses and bacteria that could trigger the next great pandemic. So now I ask you, do you think we're ready to face another plague of that magnitude? With all our modern technology, could we really stop something as devastating as the Black Death? Or are we more vulnerable than we dare to admit? Drop your opinion in the comments below, and don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Because in the next videos, I'm going to bring you more real, shocking, and terrifying stories that the world tries to forget. But that could happen again at any moment. So turn on the notification bell and stay tuned, because what's coming next will open your eyes to dangers most people don't even realize exist. After exploring an island where snakes rule alone, now let's travel back in time to relive one of the most terrifying and darkest moments in human history, the Black Death. And even though many people think this tragedy was just a stroke of bad luck or some invisible force, the real protagonists of this nightmare were the rats, or more specifically, the fleas living on them, carrying the deadly Yersinia pestis bacterium, which in just a few years wiped out millions of people across Europe. At the heart of this devastation, Paris, one of the largest cities of that era, was thrown into total chaos. Just imagine crowded streets with no sanitation, open sewage running through the alleys, rotting food thrown into corners, and on top of all that, thousands of rats running freely, leaping from house to house, crawling into beds, invading markets, hospitals, and even churches. The accounts from that time are simply apocalyptic. Rats crawling over the corpses of the dead while fleas jumped onto new human hosts, spreading death at terrifying speed. And the most shocking part? Within just hours of infection, victims would show horrifying signs: burning fevers, vomiting blood, massive black boils rotting their skin, and a slow, agonizing death that came within days. The streets were lined with piles of bodies, and the smell of death was so strong that many people abandoned their homes and families, fleeing into the forests thinking they would be safe. But they weren't. The fear was so overwhelming that rats became seen as the very incarnation of evil, an unstoppable, invisible enemy. But here's the scariest part. Even centuries later, the plague was never completely eradicated. Isolated cases still appear in remote parts of the world. And that makes us wonder, what if this horror returned in full force to a modern city? How would the world react if suddenly rats and fleas became carriers of a deadly disease again? And now let me share something even more disturbing. While we look to the past and believe these horrors are behind us, the future may already be preparing the next great infestation. As you listen to these stories, new threats are emerging around the world. For example, in Europe, super colonies of Argentine ants are spreading at an alarming rate, invading dozens of cities, forming a massive interconnected network like an invisible and destructive army. These ants don't just destroy the environment, they invade homes, attack pets, and pose serious risks to human health with painful bites and severe allergic reactions. And if you think that's all, look to the skies. Aedes aegypti mosquitoes, which transmit deadly diseases like dengue, Zika, and chikungunya, are evolving and adapting to new climates, migrating to colder regions where they were never found before. With global warming, these deadly mosquitoes could soon invade countries across Europe, the United States, and Japan, bringing epidemics no one is ready to face. And what about the sea? Venomous jellyfish, now in massive swarms, are invading beaches in Europe and Asia, forcing the closure of famous tourist spots and causing widespread panic along coastal cities. And here's the most dangerous part. A single touch from their tentacles can cause severe burns, and in some cases death within minutes. So the real question is, are we truly prepared for this next era of infestations? Or are we going to wait for tragedy to strike before realizing how serious the danger is? Just like in Hamelin, will we have to pay an incredibly high price just to try to regain control? Drop a comment below. Do you think we are ready for the next great attack from nature? And don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell. Because in the next episodes, I'm bringing even more shocking, real stories that most people have never dared to tell. So get ready, because what's coming next might completely change the way you see the world around you. After diving into these stories that sound more like nightmares from the past, the question that refuses to go away is, what if the next great disaster isn't written in history books, but is actually forming right now, right before our eyes? What few people know, and what almost no one wants to admit, is that while we remember rats, locusts, and ants that once devastated entire cities, new threats are emerging at this very moment, silently, in different parts of the planet. And here's the scariest part. Experts are warning that a new, global superinfestation could strike at any moment, affecting millions of people and leaving the entire world in shock. Want an example? The super colonies of Argentine ants, already spreading like an invisible army across Europe, are invading cities, destroying the environment, attacking pets, creeping into homes, hospitals, and schools, and leaving a trail of destruction wherever they go. And the most dangerous part? These ants have no natural rivals, they never stop multiplying, and are now connected in a massive unified network of interlinked nests that even scientists are struggling to figure out how to fight. And if you think the danger is only on land, look up to the sky. Aedes aegypti mosquitoes, infamous for spreading dengue, Zika, and chikungunya, are quickly adapting to new climates, invading regions that were once too cold to worry about these diseases. With rising global temperatures, countries across Europe, North America, and Asia could soon face massive outbreaks. And here's the worst part. With no preparation, no immunity, and no medical infrastructure ready to respond. And as if all of this wasn't alarming enough, the oceans are also sending us warnings. Entire beaches in Europe and Asia are being invaded by swarms of venomous jellyfish, forcing authorities to shut down famous tourist destinations, terrifying residents and visitors, and leaving local governments scrambling for solutions. These creatures, armed with powerful toxins, can cause severe burns, life-threatening allergic reactions, and even death. And do you want to know what's truly shocking? The number of jellyfish grows every year, fueled by warming oceans and the destruction of their natural predators. So, here's the direct and terrifying question. Are we truly ready to face a new era of infestations? Or are we going to wait, yet again, until the problem grows too big to fix, like in Hamelin, where people only sought help when rats had already taken over the city? If history teaches us anything, it's that nature always finds a way to fight back against human abuse, and when that happens, the price could be far higher than we imagine. So, drop a comment below. Do you think we are ready for the next great attack from nature? I want to hear your thoughts. And of course, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell, because in the next videos, I'm going to reveal even more shocking, real, and terrifying stories that most people have never dared to talk about. Stories that will show you that no matter how much we think we control the world, there are forces in nature that can flip the game at any moment. So stay tuned, because what's coming next will leave you even more speechless.